Is this episode 69
I think it is.
of Vertical Pursuit? I think that's what it is. I need to check that closer, but I think it is.
I think it is too.
Mike Barrett, Mike Tatlock, we appreciate you spending some time with us. We continue to hear great things, great comments from people who are listening, and we really appreciate those who have taken the time. We were going to, at some point, maybe we did that already, a place they can comment in. And
yeah, absolutely.
We've gotten some of those, and we're trying to make it easier to where for questions or responses or even topics you want to hear discussed. So what, Pastor Tatlock, what is the way that people do that?
Best way to do it is there's two ways, actually. You can get it through the app and the website, and both have a place where you can click where it says connect.
Okay.
If you click the button where it says connect, really easy to find on the website or the app, connect. You can send us your comments. You can send us your questions, your feedback. That's a really great way that we can stay in touch with you. And thank you to those who have done that. It's been great to hear from many of you who are sending those in. So we love hearing from you, and that's a great way to do it.
Also, I had somebody ask me the other day when they went on the shop to get VP gear, and they want... So we always wear the hats, and we've given away a lot of hats. We talk about the hats, but the hats aren't on there, so we got to get some hats on there.
We're working on that right now. In fact, if you go to the app, there's a button where you can click under resources, and it says there's merch there, things you can buy online, and we are updating that. I actually just met with the guy a couple of weeks ago.
Okay.
We got should be up here. He promised me in the next week or so new requests. We've got things going on there that you guys can look at and just purchase it straight from the app. And then they are sending me actually new catalogs for Carhartt stuff and hats and all that. So they're going to be updating some things here about the next week. And then soon after that, we're hoping to upload some more things like hats and Carhartt items.
And we're not making any money off that,
just so you
know. We don't make a dime. Everything is at cost straight to you for what we get it for. So there's none of, just so you know that. And then, and some people have said, well, don't, go ahead. No, that's not what this is about. And there's nobody, in no way, shape, or form have we thought to, monetize stuff like that, especially when it comes to the gear, because what the gear is an extension of what we're trying to do. And we've mentioned before that one great way to get a conversation started is to have the gear on, and we've shared stories of being asked about what VP is, and sometimes it's really hard for people to have that first conversation about what this is or where you stand or what does it mean. And a lot of dudes are being seen wearing the gear, and it's an easy way for you to, without it being a shirt that, says Jesus on it, or, something that's really loud, which nothing wrong with that if that's what you wear. Or, a lot of the reasons people have wear a cross necklace or whatever is to kind of show an affiliation, to show a belief. And VP is a little bit of a deeper way to kind of say, well, it's more of it's a discipleship program and group and podcast and book and app that I kind of follow, and it kind of keeps me centered and grounded, and kind of keeps me, and people then kind of know where you stand without beating them over the head. And It always leads to follow-up questions.
And I think what we love about, anything, we talk about this a lot, that we as men and women, but especially dudes, we love to feel we're a part of something. One of the things we've talked about so much that we struggle with as men is isolation. And we've talked about here on the podcast that there's a category of fatalities amongst men specifically that's called deaths of despair. And despair means loneliness, hopelessness, and the statistics are out there showing that is significantly higher amongst men. So when it comes back to something like swag, like a hat, a hoodie, or a shirt or something, it's like, man, I'm part of these guys where we are pursuing the same values and we are struggling through the same battles. I'm not alone. So in many ways, I've talked with guys that go, man, I love wearing the VP thing because I know I'm not alone. I know I'm not alone. So is it a hat, shirt? It's more than that. It's about belonging to something that's important, and knowing that you listening, you're not alone. You're part of the same group of guys that we all struggle with the same stuff, but we're trying to come together, build each other up, encourage each other, press on, take hold of the hope that God has for us in our lives, purpose, all of that. So it really does represent way more than just It looks good. It's like I belong, and you all the time. You do too. I'll carry hats in the truck, and I'll have a conversation with a guy at a grocery store, gas station, sporting goods store, and I'm like, hey, we got this podcast. Here's a hat, and it's like, oh man, thanks so much. It's just that a little initiation into belonging.
A little more expensive version of a business card, perhaps.
Yeah.
But, I also like brands that we've talked about this. I like brands that imply a culture and that are aspirational. A lot of the, because that's one thing I do is I do a lot of content, brand content, commercials, that kind of stuff in my other life. And so basically what I always try to do to be different is to make an aspirational type message to where you aspire to be a part of that. And we know that from the brands that we like. You're wearing a Kuyu shirt, and I was just in my garage cleaning out a bloody Yeti cooler from last night. We got our elk meat back after the hunt. And so those kind of things, and so you say, okay, why do you go buy a Yeti? And it's, well, because now I kind of like it. And then the decals that come with it and everything else. Why? Yeah, maybe it's a little superficial to some degree. We know that with branding, but part of it isn't. Part of it isn't part of a little club.
Yep.
And I like it. And it's an aspirational thing. And, a lot of guys who wear camo jackets or whatever, and it can imply like a military or hunting or outdoors, or they want to be one of those guys. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. Let me give you a quote really fast that I thought of. I just pulled up because I pulled this up on my phone the other day, and I think I gave this probably a year ago. But when you just talked about isolation, and this applies to me, I'm sorry to say, and to many others I know, and the quote is this: a man is the most dangerous when he is hurt. He could easily destroy everything around him, but he doesn't. Instead, he puts on his biggest smile and destroys himself.
Wow. Holy cow.
How about that?
That's
sad, but it's a dead ringer.
Wow. That's a solid quote.
I know it is. I don't even know where I found it. I know. I wish I could.
I think everybody who
attribute
just
it.
heard, that's the first time I've heard that. And I think anybody else that's hearing that for the first time is just kind of going, whoa, because it's true. And, we are, man. It's interesting because the quote says we put on our biggest smile and we destroy ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at each other and we smile, but on the inside, that fighting alone, isolation feeling, and then how we just self-destruct too, oftentimes from that. And that's really a big reason why we started this podcast. And that's
exactly
another reason we have a resource that we want to talk about on this podcast, that you are a big part of this. And I know a handful of other guys, and so far the feedback we're hearing is really positive. And I hope that everybody that's listening is going to be really empowered with this.
Yeah. And that's kind of why and we're going to talk about this book that accompanies a lot of what we talk about. And that's one of the reasons, kind of, I said a minute ago, we're not trying to sell books to make money. We're trying to do stuff to help. And when it comes to masculinity, when it comes to men, and that quote I just read, and this will lead right into this, I don't think it was always this way. And it was more acceptable when the roles were more clearly defined, and they clearly were in the past. And you can call me whatever you want right now. And this is not a misogynist thing. It's not a sexist thing. I'm just trying to say, and if you look back, and it's very easy for people to see how when roles are clearly defined on a team, we did a podcast on roles, on a team, in a business, in a marriage, and it doesn't mean strong and weak. That's not what I'm saying. It means when roles are defined, things just seem to go easier, and everybody has an easier time, I think, with communication. And these days, every role, there's this gray line between everything now. Depends on who you talk to, but there's certainly a group that's trying to push just a confusion and a distraction of mixed up roles and responsibilities. And we know that even sexual roles and identity and all those things that are hot topics of the day. That's why I love the title of this book that you just came out with, and some others obviously helped. And I know you'll say that, but you were the inspiration. You were inspired to do this, and I don't think it happens without you. And it's a bigger book than I thought it was going to be. But it's called Vintage Masculinity. Yep. So that kind of, the title is really, really good, but I could even see where in today's mainstream kind of, I don't know what I want to say, current, somebody would look at that and roll their eyes.
Yeah.
A lot of people look at that and roll their eyes and go, oh, what does that mean? You know, and there'll be a natural defense.
Yeah.
But I think for guys, it'll look like, whoa, it's something I want to look at and want to read. So tell me about tell me your thought behind this before we kind of get into what's in here.
Well, I'll tell you guys. So I'll say this now. So if you're only 5 or 7 minutes into this podcast, I want you to hear this before we get into the book. The book is the best illustration I can give you is imagine someone who's drowning. And when someone's drowning, they're treading water. They're trying to stay up. They're bobbing up and down, and they're taking in water. They're choking, and they're going to drown, right? And that, to me, represents a lot of men today. And we're treading water in this thing called masculinity. And some of us are just barely hanging in there. We got lies that we're dealing with that are pulling us down, fear, weight, responsibilities, confusion, regrets, addictions, loneliness, all of those things, and we're just trying to tread water. Maybe some of you who are listening feel that's you. You're just barely hanging in there, and you're feeling the weight of if you're single and you're going, man, it's hard being single. That's really tough. I feel isolated. You're married, and you're like, gosh, marriage is hard, and it's not going well, or these are our challenges, or you're a dad, and you're kind of going, man, I don't know if I'm doing well. I need some guidance. Whatever it looks like for you as a man, work stuff, you're probably treading water. For many of you, you're probably feeling, and so that picture, that image of men, and then imagine the Coast Guard comes along, and they throw a lifeline, and there's instantly you grab a hold of that, and there's hope, and that hope, and then you feel the line pull you back in, and I feel like my heart behind this book was that. How do we throw a lifeline to men who are treading in the sea of masculinity and manhood, and they're treading water? And so that's kind of the intro of like the picture I have of what was on my heart. You know, as a pastor for 30 years, I've heard guys' struggles over all these years, being a chaplain, hearing guys there, conversations we've had over campfires, breakfast. I can't tell you how many men have lived in that place of potential self-destruction that you just opened with. Hurt, pain, suffering, identity, all that stuff goes into that idea of just barely making
roles, as we talked about.
Exactly. Confusion. Yeah. What is expected of me? What does that look like? And we live in a culture, unfortunately, that wants to demonize men on top of that. So we have a culture that wants to pull you down, drag you down, the weight of that. And so this book, I'm going to say it right now before we get into it. Hang in there, because there's a way that you can get this book. I'll tell you guys here at the end of the podcast the best way to get it so that you can grab a hold of that lifeline. And then we're going to throw you another lifeline that I'm going to throw out there, and then we're going to see how this goes. And we're going to invite guys that are listening who live in the area. I'm going to throw another lifeline out there. I feel led to do this of something that I'm starting on Wednesday nights. And I'm going to put it out there and see if there's some guys that are like, hey, I need something like that. So we'll talk about that at the end of the podcast, how to get the book. It'll be available online, pretty easy for you to get a hold of. And I'll talk about that. But coming back to this idea of vintage masculinity, it's interesting because the title of the book, Vintage, it really came from the idea, you and I are sitting in my garage right now. It's our studio. It's in the garage.
It's not a garage. It's a really cool man cave. It's got a bunch of elk heads, deer heads. There's a pool table. It's not your garage, run-of-the-mill garage. You wouldn't know we were in a garage. So let me just say that.
And what was funny was when we got this house, my wife is so sweet because we got in this house. It was a downsize from the last house, and the last house I had a room that was kind of a man cave, and then we downsized, and so that went away. And I think every guy will connect with this. And again, it can be your back patio with your barbecue. It doesn't have to be a whole garage. It's just men need space where we can say it's our space, and you don't have 1,000 opinions.
That's okay.
And yes,
that's okay.
There's no other voices telling you how to organize your,
One more way you
tools, or-
failed today.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Another expectation that you're not meeting. And it's just for crying out loud, can we just turn off? So like for me, it's a therapy thing to have a garage where I can come out here and I just went after it because I just was like, this is my space. I'm not inviting any consultants.
Awesome. For guns and fishing rods and big comfortable cigar chairs. And no, it's really cool. And you hit the mark with this thing. It's really, really cool.
Well, and you know what the other part of this was we moved into here, and a lot of this man cave happened during COVID. Because we moved in this house, it was just months before COVID broke out. And so I was
really?
like, yeah.
Gosh.
And so it maybe at the most a year before COVID,
Okay.
we were really into here not that long. And I just needed a space where in the craziness of the world to hang out. And then we were just like, hey, let's do a podcast. And then it just became a sweet place to chill. But
I'm going to post a picture of this on our Instagram, the Vertical Pursuit Instagram page. So go on there, and by the time this particular episode comes out, I'm gonna send a picture
Love
too.
it. That's a great idea.
I am, because I want people to know where we're and on some of the early episodes, by the way, that are on YouTube.
That's true.
Because we did like 20
some
episodes
videos,
on
yeah.
YouTube, and then it just became so we did a full blown
Multi-camera.
3-camera show production, and it was just like, oh my gosh. And we started asking people, are you watching or are you listening? And when 98% of the guys said, we're just listening, we're like, well, we don't need to do that then. It gives us more freedom. Plus we can go longer, which we are now. But my point is, in some of those early YouTube, go on YouTube and look up Vertical Pursuit, probably our first 20-something episodes. You'll get a little idea of what I'm talking about from our background.
I forgot about
our
those
set.
videos are on there.
Yeah.
And so for me, I love vintage stuff, whether it's vintage sports stuff. On the wall over here, I got some old hickory golf clubs, and that reminds me of when I was a kid and started playing golf, and my grandfather gave me a set of his golf clubs that were the old leather golf bag and some Ben Hogan hickory clubs, and I got an old baseballs over there, worn leather ball glove and football, and and just you said elk heads and axes on the wall and pool table, and just it's vintage. It's vintage. Everything in here is old stuff, rusted.
So why for
fender
you?
from a
Why
tractor.
for you is that comforting?
So for me, what I like, and probably some of it is just a style, which is it can mean nothing other than just a lot of it brings back memories to things I grew up with. That for me, I'm living in these days of nostalgia, and the word nostalgia means, I just thought about this. The word nostalgia is where it means to come home, and the word nostalgia was actually a military word. And it was referenced when soldiers would go off to war and they were aching to come home. They were homesick. That's where the word nostalgia originated. It means I'm homesick. I want to come home. And so now it's took on a little bit more of a commercial when we talk about nostalgia around holidays, things. But it really has the idea of I feel at home around things that bring good memories. And it reminds me of things that growing up, and that's it. And also the other thing too is there's things in here that really date me. I mean, it's not just stuff I had growing up. I mean, that lever action rifle right there, that's a over 100-year-old rifle. That shotgun's over 100-year-old. And so those things way predate me. But the idea of nostalgia, the word or vintage, the word vintage actually means something of high excellence, character, and quality. You like say a vintage wine. You're talking about that year, or a vintage scotch, that year represents the notes and the flavor and the value of it, right? The characteristics of something. There's a lot of cool things that happened in other generations that stand out as vintage.
And you have a vintage truck.
And I have, and that probably was the biggest inspiration of all. And that's why it's kind of a theme. We did the video for Vintage Masculinity.
Is the video on the Instagram page?
Yes, it is actually.
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, go to the Instagram page of
I
Vertical
posted it
Pursuit,
with a
and
collab with Vertical Pursuit.
you'll see the truck that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
It's on the video on the Instagram
In fact,
page.
it's a 72 Ford that you and Carl and there's too many names. I can't list everybody's names here, but several others, Bern, my family, all went in and surprised me with this incredible '72 Ford pickup. And if you've listened to other
Stock.
podcasts,
Cool.
oh, it's everything. And you know this. I'll go in there and I'll just sit and I'll just turn it on and even not sometimes even go anywhere. I'll just sit there in the front yard. And
Well, we've mentioned,
Yeah.
and when I had a couple of old rigs and I had an old Jeep, I would get home from a road trip when I was doing NBA games, and I would go out and sit. And my son he remembers this. He was younger then. He was like probably only like 9 or 10 years old maybe, and I would go out and sit in the Jeep, and he would laugh, and he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just smelling.
I remember that Jeep.
I'm
That
literally
Jeep was
just
awesome.
sitting."
What year was that Jeep?
82.
Yeah.
I'm literally just smelling
Yep.
and it reminded me of being a kid. It reminded me of being in one of my dad's rigs. And I longed for home.
Yep.
So you talk about nostalgia, and I would sit and just smell. So when you went by my house in your truck, first thing I do is pop the hood and I stick my head in there and I just,
Yep.
and it's just, you can't recreate that.
You can't recreate it. And people go, "What does that smell like?" I'm like,
Smells like home.
it does. That's it. It smells like home. Takes me back when my dad, again, your dad, my dad passed away. So some of this stuff connects us.
Yeah.
And that's why I like the word vintage, because when I look at all this old stuff, there's a story behind all of those things. I love history. I love stories. And you go, gosh, what's the story behind that old whatever it is?
Yeah.
Just like our trucks and your Jeep, there's a story that brings us back home. And I think for me, when we think about the word vintage, it just fits so well. Plus, it's just a fun thing. In fact, so here's a fun note. The book Vintage Masculinity, it will be available online. I'll just tell you now, it's going to be available on Amazon.
It is.
Yeah, we're working towards that. We're just finalizing that.
Okay.
So it should be, again, we're working towards it. It's looking good right now. Just has to get their final approval. But the plan is that it's going to be up on Amazon for anybody to purchase for $20. So it's not expensive. We don't make a dime on it. And that will be available. I would say give it about a week, and it should be up on Amazon is our hope. But the cool thing is, if you come to church this Sunday, we're having them for sale, and we're selling them out of the back of the 72 Ford.
No way.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. So if you're listening to the podcast,
well, and you're listening,
don't tell anybody.
And if you're listening outside the area, and because I know we have some listeners in Montana, we have some in Arizona, and I know there's some in California. Your sermons, by the way, I'm just going to drop this in, are also available live on YouTube. At Grace Chapel, Wilsonville, Oregon. So, are you going to have the truck inside?
We were talking about,
because we were going to present it to you inside the church. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
That was a thought.
Sick. Oh, that would have been cool. No,
but then I didn't want it to be no offense, I didn't want it to be a church thing.
Yeah. Oh no, exactly.
And that's not that there's anything wrong with that.
How you guys did it though, it was friends and family.
Yeah.
It was really special at Thompson's house. They were amazing.
But the church has a great kind of vestibule that has these roll-up garage doors, and we thought about putting it in there.
Open. Well, and
you should put it in there.
We talked about it, but we're going to have, honestly, we're probably going to sell quite a few. And so we have to do line management. So we're going to pull the truck up. It's going to sit right up out front.
Okay.
And they're going to sell the books out of the back of the truck. So it's going to tie. I thought you'd like that.
Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah. So Carl's working on that, and that'll be this Sunday. If you happen to come to church this weekend and you see a 72 Ford pickup up on the sidewalk, that's what that's all about.
Yeah, and you need to have like vintage guns all around the truck.
in the rack in the back.
Oh, you know what?
I know,
because it does. By the way, it didn't have a gun rack in the back window. I put that in there because you have to have that.
Oh,
because that's what we grew up with.
That's what we did.
And I drive to high school and dudes that have gun racks and guns in their racks, and it was just no big deal because. I know.
Today, it boggles
time,
people's, and we get that. And I do. Both you and I respect different generations. Obviously, there wasn't the shootings in schools when we were growing up, but
when everybody had guns in their gun racks and their trucks,
and maybe
there's
something to
not
that,
implying anything, but
but at the same time,
yeah.
But I remember driving to high school. Again, it was a rural high school, so I understand that. But it was so common. In fact, we did shooting. Marksmanship was part of our PE class. The school owned guns, and I know a lot of high schools had a gun range that was not uncommon in the U.S. And it was like Boy Scouts; they would teach you marksmanship. Mm-hmm. That was part of PE class, and you learn gun safety, of course. And
the
all
YMCA camp, summer camp. We learned to shoot.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
that's that was like nowadays, man, if you draw a picture of a gun or you take a bite out of a sandwich and now it looks like a pistol, you're suspended.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's just different world.
Never mind that every little boy is going to go out and find a tree limb and a branch that he can then turn into a gun. And it's just something, anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, continue.
But Vintage Masculinity, the book, really came out, again, that picture again. Vintage Masculinity is, I'll say it this way, is that if you ask a guy, what vision do you have for your life? And vision should give you purpose. Vision should give you clarity on what you're living for and whom you're living for. Vision gives you purpose and direction in life to make decisions. Vision, I think a lot of guys are treading water and they don't have vision. And that's where there's a lot of hopelessness is, I don't know my purpose. I don't know my contribution. I don't know what I believe about things. And I'm confused. I'm bobbing up and down again. I got all these pressures. Is there any hope? Is there any way I can overcome? Do you have a vision for your fears and lies? Is there a way that you can see forward and not wake up every day in shame, especially if you're living with regret? Why do I keep doing these things? And I beat myself up and I'm tired of that cycle. Is there a vision for your life that gives you hope that you don't have to tread water anymore, that you can actually be the man that God created you to be? Because I don't think Jesus made a promise for men and women. He said, I've come that you may have a life and life to the full. And that's called what he would call the abundant, thriving, flourishing life. And the question is a vision for your life right now leading you to a flourishing life, even if you have really hard circumstances, or are you, again, just treading water? So vintage is that Jesus is the vision. When somebody, what's the vision for it? Because I'll tell you this, the world has a vision for you. The world will tell you this is what it means to be a man. And if you pursue enough toys, make enough money, if you have X, Y, and Z, you accomplish these things, you do X, Y, and Z, then you're going to be somebody and be satisfied. And the reality is, no, you won't. And you and I both have talked with professional athletes. You've had conversations with one of the richest person in the world at the time who's passed away. And you've interviewed him in the days past. We've talked with people who have what the world says is a vision for your life, and yet inside you're going, that vision still leaves me empty, doesn't leave me satisfied.
And he died alone, by the way.
Died alone. Very rich man, very well-known but unknown man in that way.
Absolutely.
And then I would say this, Satan has a vision for your life. Satan wants to, in that same verse where Jesus said that his vision for you is to live life to the full. He said, Satan wants to come and steal, kill, and destroy. And so Satan has a vision for you that's going to be destructive. The world has a vision for you that's going to be unfulfilling, but Jesus has a vision. And so the whole premise of this book is the vision, and that's why it's called Vintage Masculinity, a Jesus-formed vision. So it helps men articulate a vision for their life that gives them purpose, calling, power, hope, all of those things. Pulls them out of the water, lets them flourish and thrive, not flounder.
So give me some of this, like some of the chapter titles. Because I know that I don't have one yet, and I'm excited to get one.
Yeah.
But what's kind of the baseline that you set, the foundation that you set?
It's an interesting book because it is a little bit thicker than most people thought, but as one of our guys was saying, man, it's such an easy read. You laid it out. And so, but what's really cool about the way the book is laid out is there are a handful of chapters that gives guys a foundation for a vision for their life. And I'll walk real quick through what those are.
I want to hear.
But the end of the book, there's this additional material, which is a 40-day challenge. And it's basically a daily inspirational read. That is, you could read it in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. And that's where I've asked you and several other guys to contribute to each of these daily readings for 40 days. So the hope is that you would read the 7 chapters on the depth of what it means to be a man, Jesus-formed vision, helping you work through some of the hardest stuff, giving you clarity, pull you out of the water. And then when you finish that, you would start a 40-day purpose where every day you just take 5 minutes and it just focuses on one attribute, one characteristic of a godly man, and there's just inspiration in there, scripture. And I really think if you try that for 40 days, it can really change your life.
And what I like about daily devotionals anyway, and I do one every morning anyway outside of this, but what it does for me, because, I was not, my dad wasn't a pastor, and I know yours was. And so you grew up with it being a second language, if not a first. And so for me, 25 years ago, I guess, when I really got serious about all this, there's a lot of scripture out there that I read it, and some of it makes perfect sense. Some of it I read, and I'm not really sure how to apply that. What the devotionals do for me, and I think for others, especially if you're kind of new to this, and by the way, baby Christians are awesome. But what it does is it takes a piece of scripture and it basically writes out a devotional, and maybe how you can apply that to your life during the day, your life, on how you approach your family, your job, your wife, your friends, your leadership position in your community, all of these things. That's the power for me out of the devotion, any devotional, but especially the ones that are in this book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give you guys real quick what I call in here the formational factors. The reality is this: I use the word formational because we're all being formed. We're all already formed. When you look at the word forming, you imagine something like a piece of clay that's being shaped, it's being molded, it's being formed. And so when you look at your life right now, how has your life already been formed? Here's the other: how has your life been deformed? A lot of us are struggling because we're living with deformity. We're deformed, maybe in our physical appearance, but in our soul, in our way of thinking, in our identity. We're living with deformities, things that aren't shaped the way God wanted us to be shaped. And there's all kinds of things that contribute to our deformities. And so Jesus comes along, though, and says, no, I want to reform you. And so the word forming is meant to be something that helps us get back to who God wants us to be and helps us move from our deformities, which often hold us back, all of that. So I call them, what are the forming factors for us as men? And the first one is this idea of your convictions. You have to have, what are your convictions? Everything in life comes from your convictions.
What do you stand for?
What do you stand for? What do you believe? What are you holding on to? And
that's the series you're doing right now, is on foundations. And that's the easiest one. A lot of us, if you go to church or you don't, the parable of the man who built his home on sand and the man who built his home on rock. And so that's a really easy one to get for anybody. So when it comes to your life and what you stand for,
totally,
we can all identify with what you're trying to say there.
Yeah. And I think when you think about it, at the end of the day, every single one of us, you have a conviction of something, but every day those convictions can come under attack. Those convictions can sometimes be confusing, but if you think about this, that your convictions drive everything, what you believe about God. For a lot of you, you're listening right now, my guess is this, is most people I've learned have a really unhealthy view of God. And so even your view of God, let me give you an example. Particularly for us men, if you grew up with either an abusive dad or a dad that wasn't around, a dad that was, absent, we project that onto God. I see this all the time. And so if you have an abusive dad or an angry dad or a dad that's disappointing you and voiced that or wasn't around, you didn't grow up with a dad, so you feel abandoned. You assume, happens 99% of the time, men feel, well, God must be angry with me, disappointed with me. I'm waiting for God to, he's punishing me right now. So we project, well, that's an unhealthy conviction. Convictions are beliefs. And if you have the wrong conviction and the wrong belief, it's going to affect the way that you see God and ultimately affect the way you see even yourself. And so convictions is where I think we have to begin, because if it's a foundation, if you have the wrong conviction foundation, you're building your masculinity on the wrong foundation. We all know what happens if you build anything on the wrong foundation. Everything is not accurately measured. Everything is not leveled the way it needs to, and ultimately it can crumble and not withstand. And so we have to go to that foundation, and that's where our convictions are. What do you believe about God? What do you believe that God says about you? Do you believe you're actually forgiven when you believe in Jesus, or do you feel like you're constantly having to earn God's approval?
So tell me then, this is for me and for a lot of guys listening, if your foundation is a little jacked up,
Yeah.
how hard is it to correct it?
To be honest with you, it comes down to this. It starts with having the right truth. Because what happens is, again, it's like having a crack in the foundation. You're like, ugh, if I don't address that now, it's going to spread. And so what we're dealing with, convictions have to do with the truth of who God says. And so if I grew up with some understanding of God that's off, I got to come back and get a right understanding. How do you do that? Well, good Bible teaching, good books. In this book, I lay out actually some right convictions about God. This book can help you correct if you have some. I wrote in here specifically to go, man, I had a jacked up view of God. Oh man, I didn't know that's really how God sees me. That's really who God is. This book will help you with convictions around who God is, how he sees you, how he wants to empower you in life. Doesn't set you up for failure. God actually sets us up for success. What does that even mean? How do I have faith in those things? That's all in this section under, and his promises. There's again, the promises God has for you. And, I go through life a lot, and sometimes our hardest challenges are the promises that we hold on to. Well, those are convictions. Promises give you the hope for tomorrow. It's a lifeline again, that you're like, I'm struggling today. A promise that God gives us is a lifeline that he pulls us into our tomorrow, when we feel like we're stuck and we can't move forward. All of that lays the foundation for our convictions. So that's the foundation. So formational factor number 1 is convictions. When we go from there, the second chapter of the book is the idea of using this is battle. So our contending. Every day we're in a battle. So chapter 2 is called Our Contending, the spiritual battle we're in. The battle against lies. Satan is a liar. Jesus even said it this way. He's the father of lies. And right after that, he says he's a murderer.
So we've been talking to a group of high school boys about this very thing, about naming the enemy and looking at how he has been named, and then talking about preparing yourself, and even right down to some of these guys play football. So we were kind of going through visualizing, putting on your pads, your helmet, your shoes, lacing up, and then translating that to how you prepare in your life. And I love their scripture, which goes through getting dressed head to toe and how you're going to prepare for life and for battle. I love that.
And that's the thing too, is, in this chapter on contending, we talk about warfare, battle. How are you armored up every day?
Right.
Where are your vulnerabilities? Where are you getting attacked? And how do we stand strong? And, like just culturally, I think and it's so random and out there. At the same time, it kind of proves the point. You and I were you shared a meme with me. It wasn't a meme. It was from Politico. And it was just after the vice presidential debate the other night. And Politico they ran a hit piece on Vance, and because he has a beard.
Yes.
And I shared this with guys, and I go, it's funny and it's sad at the same time. And Politico, which you take them for what they are, really, I don't take them serious, but it shows the perspective. And so they showed a picture of Vance. They didn't even go after his policies, which it's one thing to go after someone's policies, and that's fine. They went after his beard.
You want me to read that?
Yeah, would you read it?
I found it because I sent it to you. It said,
Yeah.
Vance is the first White House wannabe to wear facial hair in 80 years. Research indicates that voters see beards as more masculine. That can be positive to some, but to others, especially women, it is negative, conveying aggression and opposition to feminist ideals. Yeah. So, and there was a picture where they circled his beard.
Yeah.
And
So now having
I sent
a beard,
that to you and a couple other guys with beards.
Yeah.
I don't have one because if I had one, I'd look like, a bad version of Sean Connery with a gray beard. But anyway, I just thought, oh, you got to be kidding me.
And we're living in such a bizarre world right now where you go, wait, are they being? Is that a Babylon Bee? Is that a satire? No, they're serious.
It made me want to grow a beard.
Yeah,
a long one. And I might
take that.
Yeah, man. Just
now having
Grizzly
a beard,
Adams beard.
Oh, actually, that would be.
I'm doing it.
I know. Every man now,
It'll
you're
age me by
associated as
15
an
years,
aggressor because you have a beard. I mean, come on. And we can kind of laugh at that, but you go, at the same time, I think one of the things we said in the book that I've heard other leaders say it, so I didn't originate this, but men don't just need perspective on masculinity, they need permission on masculinity. And again, in the book, I'd lay this out. We're not talking about running around machismo, trying to be all that. But at the same time, it's going, listen, masculinity is under attack. And the reason for that is, and I'll lay it out in the book, is that I believe that when Satan can take out a man, he can take out families, he can take out society, he can take out marriages, and it just, you look at the statistics of where you take men in incarcerations and you take men in fatherlessness situations, and you go, wow, it makes total sense for him to go, I'm going to go after the men in a society, and from there it's downhill. And so that's why when I wrote this, the thing that I felt like several years ago, the Lord said, and when I say this, I felt this thought come into my head with a weight to it. And that's how usually when I say like the Lord said something, it wasn't like an audible voice, but it was this impression, this thought that came to my head with this sense of like conviction around it, was go upstream with the men. Meaning if we can go and help men, don't demonize them. That's what culture wants to do. Let's disciple men. Discipling is what Jesus did when he took these nobodies and these marginalized young men and said, hey, come follow me. And he put a stamp on them, a purpose. And he said, I got something for you. And he gave them dignity and value. And he gave them marching orders. And that's what discipleship is. It's forming men. And Jesus wants to form us into what he has for us. And so let's
love.
Absolutely. We talked about that.
Yes.
At breakfast this morning.
Exactly. And so I don't want that to come off as a feminine term.
Exactly.
It shouldn't. And that's where this is, if you think we're trying to be all, pound our chest and be gorillas, it's not. It's those things are part of that. And I think if you understand that and you watch the formation of his disciples, the biggest overarching thing, yes, number one was roles, identity, foundation, but love was a massive part of it.
Yeah, and brotherhood. And
acceptance.
Exactly. And you go, that's masculine? Absolutely.
I'm in.
100%. And so again, I think that the way Jesus calls us to be men redeems, takes back what the enemy is trying to do destructively and brings it back to a place where God does something purposefully for us and takes the broken edges off and puts purpose on that, restores that, all those things. So the second chapter is on contending in the book, the battles we face, the lies and those sort of things. It helps you go, whoa, the brainwashing in society. I do a whole section in there on something called menticide. And you're like, wait, what is that? Well, it comes from the word genocide. But back during the 60s and 70s, there's all this propaganda, brainwashing, and all of that was done in different militaries and governments. And there was a phrase that was coined called menticide. It was basically like, if you can control someone's thinking, then you can lead them down a path of destruction. And that's why it's called menticide, meaning mental genocide. And so Satan wants to do that. He's the accuser. So if you're out there right now and you feel accusation every day, you feel like a piece of garbage, piece of crap, you're not good enough, that's Satan accusing you that you're unworthy of God's purpose and love in your life. That's a spiritual attack on you, and it's amplified in our world and society. So this chapter will hopefully help a lot of you really get a grasp of that, and again, stop treading water that throwing you a lifeline.
And if I can say this, when those thoughts come up, and I don't have them all licked because I have many of the same things. I know so many guys who they refuse to even go into that room in their brain, into that house, because they don't want to be disappointed. So therefore they ignore it. But as disappointing as it might be about yourself and your own thinking, I urge you not to do that. Don't ignore that. Go into that and go, yeah, I really do question whether or not I have what it takes.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to get to work on trying to defeat those thoughts.
Exactly.
Because I have those thoughts all the time.
Absolutely.
And I know, and there are times, and I was talking about this the other day, when I've had friends who've, and I've probably mentioned this before, but who've not necessarily strong walk with the Lord, who one time texted me and said, does it make sense to say, he said this in a text, does it make sense to say that I feel like I'm under attack right now? I said, it makes total sense, dude. And I love that you're telling me that. And I love that you're addressing that because so many don't. You deny it. And then you don't want to, then you go, I'm not going to that. So I'm going to go look at porn. I'm going to go watch Netflix. And I'm just going to block that thought out. What was that? I didn't like that. I'm going to distract myself to the point where I'm thinking about, I'm going to play video games. I'm going to think about something else so I don't have to address that monster in my head that is there. And I know it's there, but I'm not going to look in that direction. No, turn to it and go get it because it's not going away.
No, that's so good, man. Yeah. And that's the battle we're all facing every day. All of those challenges. And then what are the tools to overcome that? And we've talked about take every thought captive and part of like, what does that mean? How do we do that? And
I say that all the time. And then once in a while I'll flip on, or like when I send these episodes off, I'll listen for a second to make sure everything sounded okay. And I'll hear myself say that. And then I stop and go, what do I even mean by that? I mean, I know because I read it in scripture, but I go, what does it really mean? And how do I really, am I full of BS or do I really know how to take every thought captive? Or am I being a fraud by saying that and not knowing really how to do it? But I don't know if a lot of guys do know how to do that.
I agree. And that's what we talk about in the book. Like, what does that look like? And the other chapter in here, chapter 3, is your core. So we talked about your convictions, contending battle, and now your core. What is a core? And that's in this chapter, I use the illustration of the 72 Ford. And the idea behind that is, I mean, this thing's gorgeous. And every weekend I shine that sucker up. I wash it. It's therapy for me. But that truck is not just meant to look good and polished. It's meant to be driven. And I love to get in that truck, especially on a Sunday afternoon that's sunny and a country drive. I just go. I roll down the window and I just go. And it's just this, for me, it's just a place of peace. And it's this higher level of just like rest, you know, and I hear the engine roar and all of that stuff. So it was the truck wasn't just designed to look good on the outside. It was built to run on the inside. And so the analogy there in this chapter of the book is popping the hood and getting to the core of us and going, listen, how many of us men are just polishing the outside, trying to look shiny on the outside, putting on the smile, like you said at the very beginning, and then on the inside, we're dying. On the inside, the engine is off and I need a tune up. So this whole chapter is dedicated to popping the hood, talking about things like my fears, talking about what my heart is feeling, desires that might be getting me down into trouble, my identity. We talk about where you find your value, your thinking. If there been past trauma and hurt in your life, how do I find healing? What does it look like to walk? That's all popping the hood in this chapter, because if you have a strong core, just like athletics, but if you have a strong core, it means the engine's tuned up, it's ready to go. And now you're sailing because God created you to be that 72 that's on the highway, not just something to be polished on the outside, but he created you to hum and roar and be out there in the expanse on the adventure of life that he created for you.
I love that that's such an easy illustration. And for guys who are, I mean, I don't care who they are, you know, the whole truck thing, the whole pickup thing. And I know people laugh at that, and we both have trucks, and you have, you know, your truck, your regular truck, and your 72. I think everybody understands that. I think a lot of guys get that. And, you know, and that's one of the things I talked about a while ago, the aspirational quality of whatever, different brands or whatever. Well, a truck falls into that.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
And so I love that. That's an easy one for guys to get. And that's, by the way, why when I put the gun rack in the back before he gave it to you, I hung a cowboy hat on it too.
Exactly.
Because I was trying to make that thing as manly as possible. Exactly. I didn't put a rifle in there, but I thought about it.
But it did. It brought me back all those great memories. And I think that's it's funny, even I've actually, since this has been written and now it's out there, a lot of women are now saying, can I get a copy? Can I get a copy?
Good.
And at first I thought, because some of them were like, I want to give it to gifts to my son or husband. And then some of them are like, can I read this for me? And I'm like, absolutely. And yeah, it's written for men because it illustrates, but the principles translate to anybody. So the chapter 4 is your character. Who are you becoming? Chapter 5 is your calling. Like, what's my purpose for living? What am I here for? Do I wake up every day and go, I'm letting the world control me, or am I controlling my purpose? And I think we can get so caught up in being busy and the rat race and the treadmill of life and the tugs and the pulls. And you wake up one day and you're going, but am I really pursuing what makes my heart come alive? What makes me feel like I'm making a difference? And whatever that might look like. So that whole chapter, My Calling, is we really unpack that, finding your purpose in life. Chapter 6 is the last chapter, and it's your community. And that one's the chapter we talk about what does it mean to be in brotherhood with other brothers? How do I? It's actually, I write in there, how do you even initiate that?
Mm-hmm.
How do I actually, what does healthy relationship with other dudes look like? And fighting that loneliness and being intentional. Even Jesus looked at his disciples and said, I don't call you servants, I call you my friends. So even Jesus was like, he needed friendship, and he showed that. So we're all created for that, but having that's hard. Some of us are like, I don't know how do I find friendship, and what does that look like? So there's a chapter in there on how do you cultivate healthy friendship with other men. And then also in there, community also includes if you're single, what does that look like? If you are married, in that section, I talk about what are the roles of a husband. This is the question I get asked by women all the time. And so men are like, give me some clarity. What is my role of a husband? What does that even look like? I never had a role model. What does that mean? And then I also have a section here on how to be a dad, father to sons, father to daughter, like you and me both, how to bless them, not curse them, and the power of your blessing over your kid, how to do rites of passage. That's in there. So things we've celebrated. When Jack, your son, we did a rite of passage with my son.
Yeah.
We did rites of passage where we got guys together and sword ceremonies and fire,
nighttime.
Speaking life over there.
Is when he turned 18.
Yeah.
It was your idea. You told me that.
But we both did that.
Yeah, I know, but that was awesome that you did that. And we brought him out and had a fire going outside and just dark at night and presented with a sword, and everybody talked about what it meant. And that was awesome. The power of ceremony and of friendship. And I think, he remembers that, and we have pictures from that night. That was a really cool thing to do. So dads, it doesn't have to be 18.
Yeah.
Just some ceremonial type rites of passage that involve whatever. It doesn't have to involve, and the sword I got him was this big Excalibur looking sword. I think I got it on Amazon. So that part isn't important.
Right.
It didn't cost a fortune. It was just more of the presentation and the symbolism behind what it meant.
It was. And having other men there to say, man, I see this in you.
Yeah.
And like, wait, what? And I think that's what we all need to do as fathers. Now, not all of us have done that. Maybe for some of us, we're like, gosh, I missed that boat. Like, yeah, no, you didn't. There's a lot of times I'll sit with men who are like, you know what? I don't have a relationship with my kid anymore. He's grown up, has his own family. I'm like, listen, there's no guarantees in life. There's no guarantee you pick up
You went
the
to
phone.
college and he hates his country now.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Sorry.
And I have had those conversations with dads who go, man, my son, we have nothing in common. He's as far on the spectrum as all my values, and I just don't see any hope for gaining any of that. And let me just tell you, there's no promises. I will tell you that. I would never say, yeah, if you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to guarantee X, Y, and Z. However, you can't manage perfection, but you can manage regrets. And you can go the rest of your life going, I got regrets. We all do. But you can stop having new regrets. And that begins by saying, well, at least I'm not going to regret trying. And I'm not going to regret trying again. And I'm not going to regret trying for the 20th time. And you never know. Maybe it's the 25th call or text to your son or daughter saying, hey, I wasn't perfect as dad, but I do want you to know I love you. And you might not get the responses, and it might not turn into, a sweet, Hallmark movie at the end, but you can at least feel that you're trying. And it's better to live with you trying than regret of fear of failure again.
And it may not be an immediate result, but those are deposits.
Yes, they're deposits. And you just never know which one might actually all of a sudden that was the one. And that rite of passage isn't just for fathers with sons, but even with our daughters, my daughter just got married, a few weeks ago. Maybe it's now been about a month, and I was sitting with her, and we were just talking about, when she was in kindergarten and first grade, and I would pick her up at school every day on Friday. I pick her up every day, but Fridays, it was our ritual. Fridays, I would take her to, there was a Dairy Queen right across the street, and we'd get a sundae. And she goes, I remember that. And that was our ritual. So they don't have to be elaborate things. It's just these little deposits, but those are rituals that you can create. And, you could do some for your son, for your daughter, it can all look different. But in this chapter on this book is just the intentionality as a father, a grandfather, whatever. So that whole last chapter is about relationships that we have, being a leader at work. What does that look like?
Well, and I think that the one thing that can be, as you said, it can be difficult for guys to do that. And where I think it's funny because I've been in some various life groups, couples Bible study type life groups. And one time we were joking around because guys, we could borrow a page out of our wives' playbook when it comes to communication. And sometimes maybe there's some over communication.
Yeah.
And then they could borrow a page from our playbook when it comes to perhaps lack of drama.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So there's these funny,
Totally.
and the more you can laugh about that and talk about that. And, so I think that, because one time there's another group of friends that I had, and there was a couple of the ladies in the group that we knew that kind of been out of shape at each other. And one of the guys looks at me and he goes, I don't think I've ever been mad at you for anything. And I laughed and I said, yeah, me neither. And so, yes, we're simple creatures. And yes, we probably could use some assistance and some help. And when it comes to intimacy, even in a friendship way, friendship type intimacy is what I mean. And openness. But it is I can see where in this, there is a definite, I think somebody could profit from this, whether they're a man or a woman, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
What you're trying to say.
Absolutely. I think what will happen is, I'm hoping, again, this is a lifeline that if you're feeling like you're out there struggling, treading, this is a lifeline to pull you in. But I think part of this is for a lot of women will read it.
Good.
And it will either speak to them personally, or it will go, oh man, I understand my husband better, my son, my father. It will go, oh man, I get them better now.
Even if he doesn't understand what his foundation is, or maybe some of his instinctual traits.
Yeah.
Maybe this will help with that. Maybe It's a little bit of a looking at the blueprint of how he was built.
Oh, totally. There was a book out years ago called Wild at Heart by John Eldredge.
I love that book.
Great book. And when my wife and I were young and married, I grew up with a lot of this kind of stuff and outdoors. And again, even in this book, I talk about masculinity is not defined by the size of truck and hunting. And it's really clear in this book that masculinity is very clear biblically, but is also a big playground. And so if you are like, well, I'm more like a musician and I'm artistic and creative, like that's masculine. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's God created you that way. That's amazing. So, but anyway, so John Eldredge, I just resonated to a lot of his wild adventure stuff, right?
Yes.
And he captures that. And so I told my wife early on, I said, could you read this? I said, he puts words to things of how I feel and think and struggle. And she read it. And when she got done with it, she goes, ah. And I was like, exactly. So I think this book can be used in the same way, where women can read it and then go, oh, I get him a little bit more. So I'm grateful for what John Eldredge wrote years ago. It was helpful for us.
I remember, I think I've told this before, but I remember, and I'm not a big reader. I'm just not. I never have been. I start a lot of books, and then I'll look back in 2 years, and there's the bookmark in chapter 3, and I never went. I need to be better about it. I'm not, but I do remember that book. And my wife and I went to it was in the summertime. We went to a pool, and I brought that book for some reason. And this was when our kids were little, and my son was little. And I was going through some of those doubts on, do I have what it takes? And the worries and the fears. and I read, like, I think it might have been the first chapter where he was talking about what breakfast looks like in his family, with the kids swinging from the chairs and the kids making guns out of sticks outside and doing gymnastics on the banister. And I went, oh my gosh. And it was that, I remember that, but there was a whole bunch in there that I felt like, and the only way I can say it is it gave me license. It gave me license to have the questions I have, to be imperfect, and to realize that it's not easy, and that they're all constructed a little bit different. But it kind of helped me on how, not necessarily like to be a father to my daughter, because I remember when we were at the hospital, and we found out what we were going to have, and my son is older than my daughter. But I remember when we went in to find out what she was going to have, and it was, and we found out it was a boy. I was, of course, extremely pumped. I mean, family name, all this stuff, but there was a boy, huh? Do I have what it takes to? A girl would have been like, I mean, not like it's easy. I'm not saying that. Totally. But for me, the responsibility, the feeling of the responsibility felt greater because it was going to be a boy. And I don't know why. And maybe that was a dent in my own self-perception of my own masculinity or something. Yeah. But that book, the Eldridge book, was probably, there's probably some other ones like that. It just happened to be one that I started to read. And so when we first started this podcast today, this episode, and I talked about a boy making a gun out of a stick outside after you've taken away every other supposed toy that looks like a gun, he's going to go out and find one that looks like it. That's from the Eldridge book that I talked about an hour ago, which is crazy. I know. It was great. Lastly, I want you, as we're kind of wrapping up on this book, which is so awesome, what are some of the titles and some of the subject matters of the 40-day devotional? Yeah. Because you talked about that, and I want to hear kind of what I mentioned, how some of those devotionals can take a subject, take a title, and then add scripture to it. And but give me just a flavor of what some of those 40 are like.
And again, this 40-day devotional at the end is kind of a 40-day reflection. Again, so if you're listening and you're like, is this for people who are not Christians? Absolutely. Don't feel that you're like, well, I don't know if I believe everything. This will actually probably be really good for you.
Good.
So I just want to encourage you, whether you feel like you have a faith or not, I just want to encourage you to read this. And so in the back, there's 40 days, and each day is very simple, take you maybe 5 minutes to read. But here's some of the subject matters. What does boldness look like? What does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be authentic, gracious, discerning, which is how do you have wisdom and understanding of things? How do you walk in God's empowerment? How do you do forgiveness? How is generosity, honesty played out in your life? What does it mean to be humble? What does it mean to be loving? How do you find joy? That's I think a really good one in here. What does it mean to find peace? Courage, making decisions, decisiveness, resilience. Those are teachability. What does it mean to be patient, honoring, trustworthy, faithful? How to have prayer, encouragement, wisdom. Those are all I'm just reading them. Each of those was its own day. So I think it's a treasure box that you can find yourself pulling gems out that will apply very specifically to probably circumstances or seasons you're in your life.
Wow. This reminds me of being in AM radio when I was in my 20s, my first job in the media, which was in radio, because the talk shows then, there was a talk show midday on the station that I was at, and every day he'd have like an author in, and they'd go through a book. So I keep thinking this reminds me of like early 90s AM talk radio. But man, I love that you have the little Vertical Pursuit logo.
Oh yeah,
on the book, which is kind of cool.
It's all connected back to that, and because the Vertical Pursuit, again, the vision of that is vertically pursuing God and inviting people along the journey, and we pursue each other in that process. So it's a resource of VP and also Grace Chapel. Together, we put this as a resource for people. I'll say this right as we wrap up again. if you want to get a copy of this, I'd encourage you to, hopefully it'll be up on Amazon for $20 here within the next week to week and a half. You can stop by Grace Chapel, the church, anytime, and they're available there. So if you want one like now, you want to come to church on a Sunday, we'll have them. If you want to stop by anytime during the week, we have copies there that you can pick up. So that's how you can get a hold of it. And then the last thing I'll say was an invitation, and I'm going to put this out there because I really want to. I feel led to do this, and I'm just going to put it out there. So Wednesday nights, I'm going to lead a group of guys, and we're going to meet at a place where we've met many times and had those campfires that we've talked about here.
Yeah,
on
kind of where this started.
Podcast, where this all started. We're going to meet there Wednesday nights at 7:00 from 7 to 8:30. That's it. It's an hour and a half. And we're going to take the next 8 weeks and go through this book. And so if you're listening, you're in the area.
And you're local,
And you're local, and you're going, man, I heard you guys talk about this lonely thing, or I'd love to kind of meet up with you guys for 8 weeks on a Wednesday night and go through that and maybe connect with some other guys that are also going to be going through that. Then the best way, if you're interested in that, getting signed up for that, it's open for anybody that wants to come, 7 to 8:30 Wednesday nights. We're going to start it here in the next couple weeks. Just the same way that we asked you to connect at the beginning, go to the connect button on the app, go to the connect button on the website, and in the comments, just say, I'm interested in the Wednesday night group. It's a Wednesday night cohort. Just say, I'm interested in that Wednesday night cohort. Just send that, and then we'll make sure that you get signed up for that, get the address and directions and all that kind of stuff from there.
And maybe for some people outside the area, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about how that's going, and maybe take a couple pictures while you're doing it and post them on the Instagram page.
And here's the cool thing, and I will say this, so when this goes, I've already had so many guys say, can I get that book and start one of those cohorts? Absolutely. So if you don't live in the area and you order these online, I know guys, I had a guy the other day, he's like, I'm going to get 20 of those, and I'm going to take them to work with some guys that are, I think, these are military guys.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to do them. I know another guy said he wants to do it with some first responders. Anybody can go through this.
Get them to our Border Patrol guys down in Arizona.
Absolutely. And so if you just want to find 1, 2, or 3 other guys and go through it, you could do that anywhere, anywhere you want. Wherever you're listening from, you can order online, grab some, invite a couple other guys, say, hey, let's get together and go through this. And I think you'll find going through it and reading it with other dudes, you'll get way more out of it, because at the end of every chapter are discussion questions. And those questions, which were AI generated, by the way.
Really?
Very fascinating. That's a whole nother thing as we're wrapping up. But we were playing with the AI question app where it reads your chapter that you wrote and then it forms discussion questions. It's crazy how accurate it is. Yeah. Anyways, so if you're interested, that's how you can get the book, and we'd love to have you join us on Wednesday nights if you want to as well.
Nice job. The book is called Vintage Masculinity. The author, that's how they would close out the.
That's how you guys did it.
That's how they'd close out the talk show segment. But anyway, we appreciate you guys listening. This is a really cool thing. I wanted to take that whole episode for you to walk through that book, because I think it's going to be hugely impactful, and I want you to be honored in your inspiration in doing it and writing it and taking these guys who were a part of it. So nice work. We will talk to you next time on Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.